when my kids were younger, and if you've heard me speak before, I have 3 daughters. And, you know, if you know anything about having 3 girls can't be in the same room together without fighting at some point in time. You know, and that's how my girls were. My oldest daughter feels like she got blamed for everything. My middle daughter feels like nobody loves her. And my youngest daughter believes that she's the favorite. Okay? And it is all true. It is all true. No, it's not all true. But, you know, my middle daughter, every year, they have these certain days where it's like the middle daughter day. And I get all of these memes from her all day long. It's like every hour she has one scheduled about how miserable I made her life, you know, as she was growing up, and how I ruined everything by bringing the baby into the house, you know, kind of stuff. And I just got back from a weekend spent with our youngest out in Colorado. And she, you know, she thinks she had the most perfect childhood ever. The only thing that would have made it better is if she had no sisters, you know, kind of stuff. Because then nobody would have questioned whether she was the princess or not. Okay, any of you guys have any of those dynamics going on in your family and stuff like that? Now, one of the other things I found when my girls were younger is that my daughters, it didn't matter which one of them it was, felt like everybody else's family was cooler than theirs. And the interesting thing is that we entertained kids at our house all the time. We had a pool, we had 5 acres out in the country, you know, we did capture the flag, we did all kinds of stuff, we hosted youth group out there. And when the kids came to our house, they always said, Mr. Miller, you guys are the coolest family ever. I never could understand the disconnect between all the other kids that came to our house who thought we were really cool and our kids who thought we were the least cool. In fact, my daughters felt like I was the most embarrassing dad ever. Okay, with the things that I said, with the things that I did. In fact, when my girls got to the age that they were able to date, or thought they were able to date, I said, well, there's no going out on a date for you, but if there's a guy that you really like, you can invite him home for family night. Okay, so Friday night was family night. We played games, we had pizza. You know, it was just a good evening. Maybe watch a movie and stuff like that. My oldest daughter set the trend for everybody, though. She said, Dad, I would rather stay single till I'm 30 than introduce a guy to you on family night. You know, kind of stuff. And that's what I grew up with. It's a wonder I have any ego left after surviving those girls. Everybody thinks the other family is better than theirs. And the reality is that no family is perfect. No family is perfect. And I realize that there are some of us who have families that are really less than perfect. I have friends that have families that were really less than perfect. And when we look at our families, we can always find flaws. Some of them really do have some flaws. Some of them just have perceived flaws, you know, and stuff like that. But the reality is there is no such thing as a family. And that's why in the midst of this study, we recognize the fact that while we need family, it's also important to have friends. It's also important to have a support group that's just a little bit bigger than that. Now, there are things that our friends and our support group can't do for us that only our family can do, but there are also things our family just can't do for us. And so tonight we're going to look at 2 families. In the very first song tonight, we talked about David. And we're going to talk about the friendship between David and Jonathan. Now, 2 entirely different families. My guess is that David thought Jonathan's family was really pretty cool. Jonathan happened to be the son of the king, and David's dad was a shepherd. Okay, so my guess is that, you know, David thought Jonathan's family was just the coolest, but they came from entirely different places, and yet God was doing remarkable things through both of them. At the time, we're going to be looking here in 1 Samuel 18, but at the time that this happened, David had already been anointed by the prophet as the future king of Israel. At the time of the story here, David had already gone out into the battlefield and killed the giant Goliath. You know, and so when we get to our part of the story, when Jonathan and David first meet, David had already done some amazing things, but he still was not the king's son. And so let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 18, verses 1 through 3. It says, after David had finished talking with Saul, he met Jonathan, the king's son, and there was an immediate bond between them. For Jonathan loved David, and from that day on, Saul kept David with him and would not let him return home. And Jonathan made a solemn pact with David because he loved him as himself. Now that's the power of friendships. Now some friendships are developed over time, and they get stronger as time goes on. Some friendships just happen. Now I have, when I look back in my youth, I have one friend that's been my friend since second grade. Okay? And really, that's amazing that both of us are still alive since then. But nonetheless, you know, this guy, he and I lived across the street from each other. We were in the same grade. You know, his mom owned a little restaurant, which meant I got great food all the time growing up. But he and I, you know, went through school. We got in trouble together. We got grounded together. We got in car accidents together. We dated girls together. And, you know, every once, he lives in Oklahoma now. That sounded really weird. We didn't date the same girls. Or I should say, we didn't date the same girls at the same time. Okay? We may have dated some of the same girls, just not at the same time. Sorry. That's not the kind of friendships we're talking about here tonight. All right? But he lives in Oklahoma City now, and about once a year I get to go out and we get to spend some time together. I actually performed the wedding for he and his wife and stuff like that. He was the best man in my wedding, kind of stuff. But that's a friendship that started out by being neighbors and then over time just growing in that relationship. And we talk, like I said, I'll go out there once a year. He doesn't make it back here anymore. He was a retired police officer and he was injured in the line of duty, kind of stuff. But I'll go see him on our birthdays. We'll harass each other because he turns whatever age I am before I do. Okay? So I have to call him and remind him how old he is on his birthday for 2 months, kind of stuff. But that's the nature of that kind of friendship. And sometimes we have friendships that are very powerful for short periods of time. Sometimes we have friendships that are powerful for very long time. Jonathan and David's relationship lasted a pretty long time, but it had some tragic endings. Now looking at 1 Samuel 19, same first 3 verses, said Saul, who was the king, urged his servants and his son, Jonathan, to assassinate David. Now listen to this. I mean, you talk about friendships that have some issues. I mean, here's Jonathan, the son of the king. Here's David, a shepherd boy, who's been anointed as the future king, who God is blessing in every battle he fights, who is moving up the ranks of the king's top officers to the point that the king is jealous of David. And he tells his men and his son to kill David, who is Jonathan's best friend. And he said, Jonathan, because of his strong affection for David, told him what his father was planning. Tomorrow morning, he warned him, you must find a hiding place out in the fields. I'll ask my father to go out there with me. I'll talk to him about you, then I'll tell you everything about it. And so there's this interchange going on where the king is talking to his son. He's trying to bring about the end of David, Jonathan's best friend. And every time Saul's efforts are thwarted, and a couple of times they're thwarted because Jonathan intervenes. Now, Jonathan and David stayed friends until Jonathan's death. You know, and that's the power of that. So when you look back and you know the whole story of Jonathan and David, there's kind of a definition of friends that comes out of what we learn about these two guys. One, Jonathan cared deeply about David. You know, and the nature of close friendships is not what you get, it is what you give. It's what you're willing to do for those friends. What lengths you would go to be there for them. He cared about David. He looked out for David's well-being. Now, I remember back, having friends that I thought I could trust, that I couldn't trust. Kind of things. Friends who I thought would be there for me, who weren't there for me. Guys who got me in trouble and then disappeared. kind of stuff. And so sometimes people you think close friends there aren't, others are just there and they continue to be there. So he cared about David, he looked out for David's well-being, and he was available when David needed him. Those are the kind of friends we need in our lives. And when you think about the friends right now that are in your sphere of influence, the friends that are influencing your life, you have to ask yourself those questions. Do they care about you? Do they genuinely care about you? Are they looking out for your well-being? And are they available when you need them? Because I can assure you, if you have friends around you that don't meet that criteria, they are not friends that you need to be around. Some of you are old enough that you've already had the experience of friends that aren't like that and what it cost you going forward and how it hurts when those kind of people are around. In Proverbs 18:24, it says there are friends, and it puts it in quotation marks, who destroy each other, but a real friend sticks closer than a brother. Remember this whole dynamic of family being thicker than water. And the closest friends are those friends that are closer to us than a family member. That we can trust them with our deepest feelings, our emotions, our thoughts, our fears. That we can turn to them when everything else seems to go kind of south. And they are vital to our own, not only our own health and our emotional well-being, but to our spiritual journey. Because there could be people that we look at as very close friends, but they're not good for us spiritually. They take us down paths, they lead us places, they encourage us to do things that just aren't God-honoring. When we think of that, you come into where we are today and we look at the nature and the power of the church, and we recognize that one of the reasons Jesus established the church was because he knew that we needed the support of others in our lives. There are almost 60 times in the New Testament where the phrase one another is used. One another. Do this for one another. Do this about one another. Share this with one another. Correct one another. Love one another. And so the power of the nature of the Christian faith is that we are called to be there for one another. And that's how Jesus intended it to be. In Hebrews chapter 10, the author writes, "Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. Let us not neglect gathering together or meeting together as some do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his returning is drawing near." Now, that's the nature of the church, but the reality is that's the nature of our relationships with one another. Think about the people that are closest to you outside of your family. You know, my hope and my prayer is that there are people that know Christ like you know Christ and love Christ like you love Christ, and therefore have the ability to care for you and have that kind of friendship. It's important to have both family and friends in our lives. Good friends. You know, some of those things they say, you can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends. You have the ability to choose the people that are around you. And sometimes we choose people around us because we want to be who they are, and they let us share some of their space for a while, but that's not a friendship. That's not a friendship that's going to support you and encourage you along the way. That's a friendship that's going to take away from you. It's going to diminish who you are. And so I want us to think about this, tonight, this aspect of who are the people in our life who are most influential. Okay? Because it's important to have family and friends, but we have to recognize it's equally important for us to be both good family and good friends. So many times we judge our family and we judge our peers on the basis of what they do for us, and we always have to pause for a moment and ask ourselves, what am I doing for them? When I was here three weeks ago or so, one of the things I talked about is recognizing that the very thing that you need from your family or that you feel like your family lack may be something that you have the ability to bring. And so what does it look like for you to bring something into your family? What does it look like for you to be intentional about bringing something into your friendships? And if you have friends around you that don't let you bring the best of you, they're not friends. The nature of good friends is that we're both blessed by those things. And so I want you to think when you go into your group time together about what it looks like to widen your relationship circle. And we're going to put a little tree up there, I think. Yeah, so look at this tree. This is what I want you to think about. This is what I'd like to ask you to talk about. The types of people that you might need. And you can add to this, okay? So there's a little place over there you can add to that list. But, someone who's a good listener. Someone who's wise. Someone who has a good sense of humor. Someone who's loyal and trustworthy. Someone who is just like a family member. And you may have some friends that fit in several of those categories. But what you may also find is that you have some area of your life that's lacking in terms of that encouragement and that support. What does it look like to invite somebody into that arena? What does it look like to pray that God would provide somebody for you in that arena? And so I just want to encourage you and I, as we kind of come to the end of this, to look at this as a two-way street of both what you give and what you get. What it looks like to be a good, godly member of your family, what it looks like to invest so that your family has more to offer, but what does it look like in the context of your friendships? And there may be times, you look around this room and I think about the adults that have invested of their time to be a part of this, that our family can't meet that need and our friends can't meet that need, that we need someone else who can come along. And who are those people that can be mentors, that can be encouragers in there when it's not family, when it's not friends? And what does it look like to open up your life to other people? But what does it look like to open up your life so that you're available for other people?